Hello, everyone. Greetings. Welcome to today's program. My name is Michelle Massey, and I'm the Director of Public Programs and Marketing at the Museum of Russian Art in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And today is December 21st, 2022, the day of the winter solstice, the longest night. We are excited to welcome in more light from here on out. So today is the perfect day to have a virtual program about our annual holiday exhibition. And this year that exhibition is called Ephemeral and Eternal Holiday Paper Ornaments from the Soviet Union. And I'm so excited to talk and delve into this exhibition, and I'm very excited to be joined not only by our chief curator, Dr. Masha Zavialova, but the founder of the collection, the collector, the foundress, the queen of this collection, Kim Balaschak. Now, so this exhibition, it comes from that larger collection of over 5,000 items, which was so generously gifted to the museum in 2021. So we have some great women here to talk about a great exhibition and a great collection at the same time. So today's program is being recorded. So you're welcome to check our website or our YouTube channel later to share this with friends and family. But those of you who are joining us today, where there is a snowstorm in Minnesota and our collector Kim is in Arizona, probably just gonna rev it in a little bit. Today, you can be a part of this program. If you'd like to submit any questions to our program, you can do that through the chat function, and we will happily get to that at the end of our program. We're gonna probably go over an hour today, so we're happy to have you here. Hope you're all cozy at home and with us today. So with that, it's time to start our program. So please welcome our curator, Dr. Masha Zavialova, and the collector, Kim Balaschak.
Welcome to our program today. Today we are going to talk about our annual exhibition that we've been hosting since 2013. It became quite popular and in demand from the very beginning. And we made a decision to have an annual holiday show based on the collection of Kim Balaschak that collected in Moscow from the late 90s to early 2000s. And her collection covers the Soviet period. And but before we talk about the collection, I would like to explain what it is that Kim collected actually. What kind of ornaments? Why do we call them New Year? Why do we not use Christmas and correct people who say, oh, we came to see your Christmas show? No, unfortunately, there was no Christmas in the Soviet Union. And so let me start sharing my screen first. And we are going to look at the images. The name of the show this year is Ephemeral and Eternal, and we are focusing on paper ornaments this year. We have never done it before, although the collection of New Year ornaments and related materials has quite a lot of things from paper. They are postcards, flag garlands, magazines, newspapers, paper ornaments, invitations to events, paper packaging, and of course, photographs. And all of this is centered around, bringing joy to these unknown Soviet children that we see in that photograph in the center of the slide. This is how you enter our exhibition, and this is our historical section. And this part talks about the trials and tribulations of Christmas and New Year in the Soviet Union. As the Soviet Union was inaugurated in 1917 after the October Revolution, the anti-religious nature of the regime began to reveal itself right away. And in 1918, right after the revolution, the calendar was changed. The Russian calendar of the Russian Empire, rather. I will be using words like the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union as this multi-ethnic and multinational empires of the bygone days. The Russian calendar, or the Russian imperial calendar, was 13 days behind the calendar of the Western Europe and most of the rest of the world. And that put Russian Orthodox Christmas after New Year, because the Russian Orthodox Church never changed the calendar. And the country to this day lives in between two of these calendars. One of them is secular, the one that we know and live by, and the Russian Orthodox calendar, including the Christmas calendar, 13 days behind. And Christmas is celebrated on January 7th, and was right after the revolution of 1917. And in 1922 was right after the end of the Civil War, was when the Soviet government began an anti-religious, full-scale anti-religious campaign targeting all aspects of the religious life of millions of believers, not necessarily all of them Orthodox. All other religions were targeted, persecuted, and an attempt was made to eliminate them completely. Because as the popular Soviet saying went, religion is the opium for the people. And there were many attempts and several approaches on how to get rid of religion. They failed. They did not succeed. But let's look what happened to Christmas, because that's what we are interested in. So what happened to Christmas, and where did Christmas go by the end of the 1920s? In 10 years after the October Revolution, Christmas in the Soviet Union was gone. The first attempt to get rid of this very popular holiday goes back to 1922, when the newspaper Pravda published materials on how to celebrate anti-Christmas, or the Komsomol, communist Christmas. There were books and brochures published on how to celebrate the kind of a holiday that would distract people from going to church. And these brochures, and we can see one of them on display, an extremely rare book from 1925 on how to celebrate Komsomol Christmas. And the things that were offered to people to be engaged and happy with were processions, public street processions that included masked characters from the deities, divine beings from all major religions, like the Egyptian Osiris and Buddha and other gods from around the world, to show that Jesus Christ was not unique. And for example, Egyptian Osiris was also a god that died and resurrected basically every year. And there was the burning of the effigies of gods and icons at the end of the holidays. There were lectures, there were songs to sing, there were plays and dramatic performances, and just public festivities in the streets. In the early 1920s, the Soviet government still thought that they did not want to go to the drastic steps of persecuting and suppressing believers, because there were millions of them, millions and millions, most of the country. That's why propaganda was put out as the main tool to fight religion and Christmas. And let's look at some of the materials from the time. So you can see here, these are quite rare photographs that I found online. These kids carry a slogan, a banner that has the slogan, the phrase that parents don't lead us astray, do not celebrate Christmas. And this is probably part of that street procession with the effigy of that is an Orthodox priest that's probably about to be burned at a bonfire. Also, Christmas was presented as a holiday to get drunk. And you can see here 2 drunks, and the phrase, the slogan here says, "Down with church holidays." And here you can see the further down into the development of this anti-religious program and the history of the Soviet Union, the more. This magazine shows the tree, a potential Christmas tree, and the sign here says it's prohibited to chop or to cut down Christmas trees. Oh, you can see here actually a translation. It's forbidden to cut down trees for Christmas. And here on your left, you can see a church converted to a communist club or Komsomol club. So instead of icons, you can see here Lenin and some other characters from the Soviet government, the leading communists of the time. And it's just why I spend so much time talking about this. People just do not realize how drastic this anti-religious campaign was. Hundreds of thousands of believers and priests were sent to the Gulag, and a lot of them perished there or were executed. And thousands of churches were destroyed. And I found this very rare footage that shows the destruction of churches in 1922. So churches were destroyed. I'll just do the simultaneous translation. This is a church cross-section. You see some Red Army soldiers. And icons are carried out of this church. Yeah, it's a very short video clip, but it's very shows tangibly what was happening at that time in the 1920s. Just one episode out of thousands. The government, by the end of the 1920s and in 1930, went even further, changed the calendar into a 5-day week, eliminating all kinds of religious holidays. None of them you can see here in this calendar. And creating a 5-day work week where each day had its own, if you look at these images, the hammer, sickle, this is a small airplane, book, and flag. And then again, a hammer and a sickle. The 5-day work week was on a sliding scale. So each group of people was based on this science, was given days off at a different time during the week. And this red sign says, remember your picture, your image. This is your day off. And at work, people were assigned these different kinds of symbols, like a hammer or a sickle or a flag or a book. And these were days off for these groups of people. And in 1931, still further, no days of the week named here. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. And for a good reason, because Sunday in Russian means resurrection. So any kind of the reminder of any religious connotations was eliminated. And the holidays, we see the November, the holiday of the revolution, then in January, the day of the remembrance of the victims of the revolutionary movements, and in May, Labor Day. So we're not going to watch it again. But then in 1935, a strange thing happens. In the newspaper Pravda, an article was published by Pavel Postashev, a communist leader, that called for the celebration of New Year with decorated holiday trees. And it said that every Soviet child deserves having a fun and merry winter holiday and a decorated tree. That changed the life in the Soviet Union as far as family life and family holidays very significantly. New Year became the most popular holiday. It was the only secular, non-ideological holiday. And it was celebrated with a lot of merrymaking, great food, and of course, a decorated tree. And here, now we go more into Kim's collection. And I want to show you a few of the very rare pieces that Kim collected while in Moscow. These are the first posters, the earliest posters that announced the first public celebrations of New Year after a long period of prohibition. It's hard to imagine that 3 or 4 years before that, before they date to January 1937, that just a few years before, decorating a tree was prohibited, even though there was never a decree on, not on just the prohibition, the official verbalized prohibition on the Christmas tree. But it was strongly discouraged, and people could get in trouble, including prison sentences, if they openly celebrated Christmas as a religious holiday. A lot of people still continue to celebrate Christmas behind closed doors and with drawn curtains on windows. And then comes 1935, the December Pravda article. Of course, the Soviet industries did not have enough time to prepare for the first officially allowed New Year celebration in early 1936. So it's only in 1937 that the first public holidays in the House of the Unions in Moscow and other places, and later in the Kremlin began to be celebrated. And here we have this the earliest posters and the award here. This is the award to the person who was the one who organized these first public celebrations of New Year. And here is my question to Kim. So how did you, every time I work with this collection, I am amazed at the depth and the scope and of what Kim collected, the diversity and variety of materials. For me as a curator to be able to cover practically every theme that we choose for our exhibitions at the museum in depth and with a good supply of wonderful, historically unique and very valuable materials. Kim?
Well, thank you so much, Masha. I'm often asked if I curated the exhibition that's on display at the Museum of Russian Art, and I say, no, I am not the curator. I am the collector. Masha's the curator, and together somehow we've created something truly special, and we have preserved a slice of history of a country, the Soviet Union, that is no longer in existence. As it says on the entry poster at the museum, this USSR is long gone. My husband and I lived in Russia from 1995 through the end of 2008. But it was in 1998 that we decided not to return to the United States for the holidays, but to stay in Moscow. The mayor of Moscow had been putting up trees and lights, and the city was so festive. And so we decided to stay. And so I thought, well, if we're going to stay, I need a tree. So I picked up a metal tree that had sort of foil hanging from the metal branches. And then I went out to the flea market, Izmailova, which is probably my most favorite place in the whole world after the Museum of Russian Art in Minneapolis. And so the flea market was set up in two ways. They had wooden booths on one side where vendors were selling souvenirs like Matryoshka dolls and lacquer boxes and amber, etc. Then they had the flea section, and that's where anybody came from anywhere. Just put down a box, put something over it, and they sell things from their own homes that they don't want anymore. Or you had vendors coming in from the regions, bringing things in on Saturday morning to Moscow because that was where the money was. And so I noticed this small little figure that looked to me like a Santa Claus. And come to find out, it is Grandfather Frost, a very, very important figure through Christmas, since the time of St. Nicholas, all the way through to modern times. But the woman who was selling him, my Russian at the time was really broken, and so she had said to me that she knew that he was at least 50 years old because she was 56 and she had been putting him under the tree since she was a small child. So that started it, that snowballed it. And needless to say, I decorated that little tree that first year, put the ornaments away. The next year I opened up the boxes, and that was the point at which I realized, oh my gosh, I don't have just a box of ornaments here. I have a slice of history of the country that I am currently calling home. And it was at that point in time that I began to embrace the notion that, yes, indeed, I was a collector. And with the help of vendors and other collectors and ordinary Russians, I was told the stories through these precious items. And so that's sort of how I got it. I had my first exhibition in 2002. CNN did an amazing video about that, which is on YouTube. And so then we left in 2008, and then I wrote to Masha in 2012 about the collection, the existence of the collection, at which point in time she said, let's get it up here. I did. And we have officially accessioned everything into the museum's private collection, where it will be shared and shown for forever. I'm so grateful to her.
Thank you, Kim. And one question, I want to deal with it right away because it always comes up. So when you were leaving Russia, when your Jim's work was, he was done with doing his business there, and you faced this problem of how to, or whether to take your collection out of the country with you. And so what happened?
Thank you, because it's a very touching story. Allied Pickfords had been packing, unpacking, and storing my collection since my first exhibition in 2002. So here we are 8 years later, and we're going to leave. And of course, I wanted to take the collection with me. I had a list. We called the Ministry of Culture down to the warehouse. They had printed all the pages, you know, like 90 some pages of items. And there were two women from the Ministry of Culture there, and one had asked me to see some obscure ornament on, you know, page 53, and I said, that's impossible. I don't know what box it's in. That's not going to happen. At which point the other woman said, stop. We are giving you permission to take this collection in its entirety out of this country. We know that there are items in here that other collectors in this country do not have. We know that there are items that are exceedingly rare, but you've shown that you will share it. I've been to both of your exhibitions, is what she said. And she said, take it, share it, and show a positive side of Russia and Russian culture.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, that's an important question, because we always get this question on how the collection crossed the border and got out of the country, because definitely it's a cultural treasure that, as you said, it's a slice of history, and it shows and you know, every art form, every collection is it's like a lens, it's like a window into a unique side of the culture that you don't see from any other angles. So it's this angle that we can look at. So the Soviet culture, mostly of course the Soviet Moscow of between 1935 and 1966, because that's when Kim's collection stops. And it's not just ornaments. This collection has figurines, sculpture, magazines, newspapers, postcards, telegrams, masks, even pieces of porcelain related to New Year, costumes, and what else, Kim? I think
you got everything there.
Packaging, unique packaging from as early as like probably some of it is late 1930s and 1950s. And so why does it stop at 1966? That's another question that we get.
Well, I am a member of the Golden Glow. I was for quite some time an international organization of holiday collectors. And the Glow had established 1966 as the date for collectibles of holiday items being antique, because around the world after that date, production really became so much more mass oriented. And so that was the date that was established. They've now have a 50-year floating date, because there are collectors of 70s and there will be collectors of 80s items that, that will be coming in. So the organization is evolving.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So looking at this picture, it's 1986, but probably some of the ornaments date back to earlier years, because as everywhere else in the Soviet Union, people preserved their holiday ornaments, because a lot of them were connected to events in family life and family history. I still remember my sister's large red bauble like this. I didn't have one. She had one. I always envied it to her, but my mom always said that my sister got it before I was born even. So I should not, that's an old vintage ornament, and there are none like this anymore. And she still has it. So these ornaments that Soviet people used also had family stories around them. And I'm sure Kim knows a lot of those, or the stories of how she interacted with the collectors and listened to their stories. And probably that's why she was so much loved at the Zavialova market, that when I went to Moscow in around 1915, bringing some paintings for an exhibition there. And I went to the Zavialova market and I talked to a vendor there, and I said, I'm in touch with this great collection in the United States. And he said, oh, it's Kim's. I was blown away that he knew her. And let's now look at what the collection has. And let's look again at this slide that I put at the beginning of the presentation. So here you can see images. Not all of them are from the current show, but you can see some postcards. This is a pre-revolutionary postcard, because Kim also has, being a very thorough collector, she collected not just ornaments, that would have given this collection a very narrow scope. But she collected the related materials, and a little bit around that time period, especially before 1936, we should say. So we have a good section of that collection from before the revolution, from 1917. And that allowed us to have an exhibition here several years ago that was called Christmas with the Tsars. Was quite wonderful. And also we have here these paper garlands and magazines and Soviet era ornaments. These are very Soviet, with the hammer and sickle, and the posters, and then we can see here envelopes and even letters and newspapers and packaging and figurines back here that they are themselves not made from paper, but they have paper clothing, paper costumes. And one of my favorite parts of the collection that's really very warm and very intimate is the handmade ornaments made by children at home or in a family circle, or sometimes probably at school, because I remember we had home economics or home economics classes, lessons at middle school, where we taught to make these paper ornaments from scratch. There were a lot of patterns published in Soviet era magazines where you could cut out an ornament and then glue it together, and it would look like this. So these are handmade from patterns in magazines and glued together at home. And a very rare handmade poster, probably a student group that made it. It's basically an announcement and invitation, probably was put up at the factory or in college. We don't have any publishing information because it's one of a kind. It's hand painted and handwritten. Really a unique kind of poster announcing the carnival for New Year. This is the poster and the handmade ornaments. And we have this postcard from the 1950s that shows two kids with, a little brush for glue and ornaments that are very similar. Look at this one. I think this is the one that we have here, probably a pattern from the magazine that the kids used in the picture postcard here. And more handmade ornaments here and handmade garland. Flag garlands were produced starting from the first year when New Year was allowed, 1936, because we can see them in our two 1937 posters. And they were extremely popular. They were easy to make. They were very inexpensive, and probably in the early years of New Year celebrations, they were part and parcel of every New Year, and every family had those. But this garland is unique. It's handmade, hand-painted, hand-drawn by a kid of probably 8 years old, because his hammer and sickle is it's an invention. It's not, it's a hammer and sickle that this child only knew how to draw. And some stars and just a handmade garland from the early 1960s, I would say. And a charming fish tank, also handmade from scratch. And I should mention here that New Year did not become an official public day off until the late 1940s. And only truly in the late 1950s and 1960s, New Year has become the #1 public, most beloved holiday for the Soviet people, because it was entirely centered on the family and fun. And the carnival, it was not ideological, and New Year trees became this place, this space where you could, create your own hierarchy of the world. You could put a hammer and sickle ornament, and next to it, you could put a piglet and a crocodile, or a samovar, or a doll, or whatever. And so it was this very joyful place of ideological reversal where you were free, you had freedom to create your own little world of these tiny images and figurines. So some flags, the top garland is from the 1930s, mid-1930s. We see this garland on our 1937 posters, and then some from the 50s and probably early 1960s with children and fairy tale characters here. And to show the continuity of that tradition of New Year decorations, we have one Christmas tree from the pre-revolutionary period, ornaments that date back from before 1917. And you can see here little boxes and Dresden. These are called Dresden cardboards, initially produced in Dresden in Germany and still carrying the name. Collectors call them Dresdens. And also the figurines, the squirrel. A lot of these ornaments before the revolution were imported from Germany. Like Germany was the country for ornaments, and basically Christmas as we know it was to a great extent developed in Germany. And Imperial Russia exported a lot of ornaments from Germany, as well as probably most of other European countries at that time. And look at this wonderfully made boat. It's paper. It's not metal. It's not wood. It's made of paper, extremely fragile. And that's why when I was putting together this show, I just was amazed at how preserved these very fragile ornaments were. And just keep saying that it's a miracle that they survive. And they survived due to the people who preserved them as part of their family tradition. But the fact that we can look at them is entirely the credit of our collector, Kim Balaschak here. Otherwise, they would have stayed in families, and some of them would have probably thrown away by the next generation, because paper, you know, all the time it does begin to look shabby. And sometimes we are tempted, especially at our younger age, to replace old and shabby and torn ornaments with something new and glittery and shining. And then we lose the memory and the history and the time. This is also made from paper, the little tin soldier, based on a story from Hans Christian Andersen, a Danish storyteller. So more pre-revolutionary, and now we are looking at our Soviet tree. And these ornaments are even more rare than pre-1917, I would say, because that tradition of making Christmas ornaments that started probably in the, I don't know, late 18th, early 19th century is still going on. Soviet ornaments were produced between 1936 and I would say the collapse of the Soviet Union, 1991, even though the last 10 decades, probably ideological ornaments were not really produced in big quantities. So it's a very short period. It's what, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, half a century. And this country is long gone. No one is gonna make these ornaments other than either trying to mock or trying to fake Soviet era ornaments, but in making these ornaments with a true mind and heart, as it was back in the Soviet period, is impossible now. So really unique, never to be repeated. And even if contemporary Russia is going to restore something similar to a Soviet Union, it will be something very, very different, entirely different from that socialist country that was the Soviet Union. Also, we can see some cardboards here. In the Soviet Union, they were not called Dresdens. Probably some collectors who still remembered those pre-revolutionary ornaments would call them Dresdens, but we call them cardboards. There were factories in Leningrad and in Moscow that produced a lot of cardboard ornaments. And the wonderful figurines dressed in paper, but very expressive. So here you can see on your right, you can see some of the very rare Soviet era ornaments. This one is a border guard with a dog. Is one of the most rare, probably costing thousands of dollars right now, because you cannot find it in the market anymore. You can only buy it from a collection, from a collector. One of the most unique Soviet era ornaments from the, it was probably made late 40s, early 1950s, Kim, right?
Yeah. When they would wet the cardboard and then they would put it into molds that were mirror images of each other, and then form the the ornament, and then glue them together and then finish it off in some way. And you can see this one is golded, so it's not gold, but it's a gold color on the outside. Some were silver, some were painted, matte finished, painted.
Yeah, they are all double-sided.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the fascinating sections of the collection and of this exhibition are masks. So here we are showing not the costumes, not the mannequins, but the masks from the pre-1966 Soviet Union. Why masks? We often get these questions. Well, the only time and the only holiday where Soviets would wear masks was New Year. There was no Halloween. There were no pagan holidays. All other holidays were heavily ideological. And the New Year was the time of the winter carnival. It comes shortly, just a week after the winter solstice. So the ancient pagan traditions were underlying these Soviet era carnivals, and people would wear masks and costumes, and quite often these masks were animals, forest animals, also characters from fairy tales and from literary texts, also like the Pushkin's tales, but also, of course, the Grandfather Frost and the Snow Maiden. These were the two main characters that were indispensable at every New Year event. And I think to this day, you can hire a Grandfather Frost to visit and bring gifts to you. And this is our diorama. Here we show a girl in a school uniform. The school uniform is the only thing that is not from Kim's collection. Here it comes from the collection of our founders, the Susan Johnson. It's a school, Soviet era school uniform from the late 60s, early 70s. And the girl is making an ornament. You can see here some patterns, and this ornament is one on that printout of these different ideas for handmade ornaments. And one handmade ornament she made already, it's here, or the second one is here, and she's making the third one. And on both sides, you can see these photographs from before 1966. And this girl is wearing the exact same uniform as our girl does, because that's a historical, authentic Soviet era uniform. And on this side, you can see a tree fully decorated with the star on top, and you can see some cardboards. We have this bird in our collection. Kim, do you remember this? I think even several birds.
Yes.
And we have these figurines and forest animals, a giraffe here. And of course, why this sticker is here is because of the honeycomb ornament. And this is something, so let me first go to the honeycombs, and then we'll return to these. So where are our honeycombs? Masks. Wow. Here they are. We have never shown them before. They are not easy to show because these are they fold. They're folding ornaments. They are extremely fragile. When you begin to open them, we used magnets and tiny plastic clips to keep them together. And these ornaments were especially popular in the early 1960s. They were very inexpensive. Some of them cost like, because they have prices on them, 6 kopecks, which was at that time, based on the official exchange rate, was like 4 cents. That's why they were easily dispensable. People would, if they tear them or if there is damage to them, they would just throw them away and buy a bunch of new ones. They were really very affordable. And that's why this section of our collection is extremely valuable. And it's, again, I say it's a miracle that these honeycombs survive in such a good shape as these are. Kim, do you remember how you were and how you got these?
No, but I can tell you that the vendors didn't place much value on them. And in some cases, they would be selling me, some other sort of ornament. And they say, oh, and I found this here, just take it. Okay, thanks. And what was amazing is if you look here and you can, it's hard to see from this particular photograph, but there are animals, there are people, there's the young boy parachutist. They're just really sweet, but so fragile. And I personally didn't ever try to really even open them because I was afraid if I put a paper clip or something on the end that I was going to tear some of the honeycomb. And so Masha putting magnets there was brilliant and the way to share them.
Yeah. When in the late 1960s and especially in the 70s, the Soviet toy factories, because that's where ornaments were made, just based on the name, because you know what Christmas ornaments in Russian are, right? They are tree toys.
Yes.
If you translate the exact word. So they were produced at toy factories. And toy factories began to turn out a lot of glass ornaments with also different characters and fruits and vegetables and animals and houses and lamps and little teapots and whatnot. And those were very desirable, and people wanted to decorate the trees with these new shiny beautiful ornaments. And the paper ones began to, they even stopped producing them at such quantities as before because people were not really interested in them anymore. And that's why the ones that we have, probably they all date to the late 50s, early 60s. And I don't remember seeing a lot of them in the 80s even, for example. So these are really, really very rare, and they were produced only for a short period of time. These little masks as well are some of the unique things in our collection. Kim, could you?
Yeah, in fact, this little collection here of these 5 masks is an example of something that the Ministry of Culture could have, purged from my collection, because these masks are unique. And amongst my dear friends who also collect, they have not been able to find these. And so thank goodness the ministry let the collection come in its entirety so we can see these precious masks.
Yeah, I believe they were handmade, just
Yes.
uniquely handmade at small production centers that were called Artel. They were abolished in the 60s, but in the 50s, people could still get together and organize a cooperative. Artel was a cooperative, like a workers' cooperative that was, of course, governed based on the laws of the Soviet Union, but it had a cooperative property, the production tools and facilities. And these were very small workers' co-ops that quite often handmade their ornaments and figurines for New Year. And these garlands we have a good collection of those. They were not for trees, they were to decorate rooms and halls, hallways, and these are our penguins. And these are the patterns that were used to handmade ornaments at home. And sometimes they were used at home economics classes to teach children how to cut and paint and glue, but also they were used at home. These figurines, they have paper costumes coming from one such Artel, a workers' cooperative, which was called the Paris Commune, that was functioning the late 1930s through probably late 1950s, the Paris Commune Artel. Not in Paris, in Moscow. Our beautiful masks and this unique set that was made in 1939, and it's called In Memory of the All Union Agricultural Exhibition. And here you can see Kim has the full set, including the milkmaid here. And these are farm animals made from paper. They are also double-sided, printed paper. And here we see some other packaging that's also quite a miracle that they survived to this day. We can see packaging for flag garlands, for glitter, or it was called artificial snow. These are tree lights and serpentine, confetti, and tinsel. And boxes, this is a box for the ornaments. Now let's look at some other things made from paper. And these could be inserts to magazines. They are masks that you could cut out and wear on top of your head, probably tie strings to the ends, to the edges, to the corners. And you could do it literally in 10 minutes, and you are well equipped for a Soviet era carnival around New Year time. The collection also has several hundred printed materials, magazines, and also about 800 postcards, also letters and telegrams, if anyone remembers what it was. These telegrams were a way to send a greeting in overnight from one town to another. And these magazines are not just a random selection of magazines, they are the major Soviet era magazines that everyone knew. Most people subscribed to and received those at home. We can see one magazine from the Stalin era. I think it's just shortly before Stalin's death. I believe it's a 1952 ornament magazine. Also, we have the magazine for women, the Worker Woman, then the Woman Collective Farmer, Health, Knowledge is Power for students, Crocodile, Soviet comics, a lot of them political and anti-Western, and Murzilka, which is an untranslatable word for children. And a wonderful collection of postcards. The collection of postcards is arranged chronologically this year. We always show some examples of postcards, but this year I just wanted to show the development of postcard art from the pre-revolutionary. So we have these from before 1917, and they are like traditional, a lot of them traditional Christmas greeting cards with the Santa, probably Grandfather Frost, and children praying, and people carrying Christmas trees. And then we go into the period of the Prohibition, when neither Christmas nor New Year, no holiday tree were allowed. We just have one dated postcard. There are some other postcards that we suspect are from the 1920s, but this is the one that has the date, or at least it has the name of the publisher that was active between 1928 and 1932. The Association of the Artists of the Revolution that was abolished in 1932. So we know for sure that's before 1930. This is the date. But then starting from 1941, the war period, we have a very diverse and rich selection of postcards from the wartime. And a lot of these show children and families writing letters or sending letters to the front. And that's why the little mailboxes became a very popular ornament, tree ornament during the Second World War, because mail and letters were the only things that connected families at that time, the only connection, the only thin thread that kept families together. And sometimes you see this woman holding a triangle, and this is how families sent letters to the front. No postage stamp, no postage was necessary. And then we go into very simple, the first several years after the war, black and white postcards, and an explosion of colors and designs in the 50s and 60s. And some of them all of them have dates, the publication dates on the back. If you look at the top row, 1950 to 55. So this postcard is 51, 52, 53, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, and 55. So you can see the progression of styles, how slowly we depart from this more traditional style, moving into the 1960s and the space era. For example, this is 1963, the first woman, Valentina Tereshkova, in space. And we immediately have a Happy New Year postcard. And an amazing collection of hundreds of photographs from family archives that in the 1990s people sold to, the pensions were low and people sometimes just sold their family photos to get some extra cash. And so you can see here just a variety of costumes, a variety of kinds of home events and public events at schools and kindergartens. Just an amazing historical slice of Soviet era here.
And I draw your attention to the, Masha, if you could just go back to that one, to the center left. You can see one of those paper masks on top of the young girl's head.
Yeah, this
Yes.
one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so with this, we are wrapping up our virtual tour, and you are most welcome to give us questions.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. This was a great walkthrough of the context, the history, the collection, and going into this particular exhibition. Kim, I want you to, I know you were here recently. Just as a person who's here all the time in the exhibition, it's been so wonderful to see people of all ages, lots of children, but all ages, come through this exhibition. We've got the Nutcracker playing softly behind now, and you know, do the gallery hunts and look for the little animals or ornaments, and just look with such curiosity and learn so much about how people of the time were celebrating, you know, the New Year in the Soviet Union. So it means a lot to us to really see people interacting with this exhibition, and over the years, all of them. So thank you.
Yeah, I see one question in our chat. What did they do with the artwork and altar pieces from churches?
I think that's from like post-revolution.
Yeah, so during the 1920s and 30s and even later. A lot of it was destroyed, but there were people, and a lot of them, especially museum workers, who worked in museums from before the revolution, and also other activists who tried to rescue icons. You know, icon paint, the art of icon painting was in mortal danger at that time of a complete destruction. So a lot of icons were, there was the Committee for the Preservation of Art for the People was created. So these museum preservationists tried to use the contemporary ideological phrases to convince the government not to destroy all of the artwork, sacred art from the churches, because it's, after all, it was created by people, for the people, and it had many of the pieces, many of the icons found their safe home in museums, and we can still see them to this day. In 2008, we had an exhibition of icons from Yaroslavl, and there was the story of how that museum in a provincial town in Yaroslavl rescued many, many icons from the destruction. Sometimes museum workers or activists from that Committee for the Preservation would learn from the local communist committee about a church scheduled for destruction, like in a week. And they would just ask for a chance to run quickly to that church and carry out as many icons as they could to save them and keep them in a safe place. So it was both, a lot of destruction, but some rescue efforts by activists were done.
So it looks like there's a question about the red star on top of the tree. What is the significance? Is this person is asking if it's a purposeful substitution using a red star?
Absolutely, it was a purposeful substitution because it's a star, but instead of the Star of Bethlehem, we have the red star of the Red Army and the star that appeared on the Soviet flag. It was, propaganda in the Soviet Union was always clever on how to put ideas into people's heads and also take ideas out of people's heads as well.
They're asking about, also the same person asking about what would happen if a family was caught, so to speak, celebrating Christmas during that time? Was there a punishment? Would something happen?
Yeah, because that was never put into the criminal code, celebrating Christmas, like 5 years of gulag. That never happened, fortunately. But people could be found guilty for engaging in religious propaganda or something, for example. And there were cases when people were punished for this if they were discovered. And at the end of the 1920s, I would say, I know that I read stories that there were communist activists that would go from home to home to check if people had decorated trees. It was not widespread, but it happened, and then people would get punished but not for, because there was no such phrasing in the criminal or civil code. Then they would be punished for something else, like religious propaganda or anti-Soviet propaganda, probably.
And there was a time where, what era would you say, when folks would have the tiny trees that were hidden in their homes? We've had some of those on display.
Yeah, this I keep reading about it again and again, that people would go to the forest, cut a tree, cut it into 3 or 4 or 5 pieces, put it in their backpack, bring home, put it together again, a real life tree, and celebrate.
But this is not to be confused with the small trees and the miniature ornaments that I have, that we have in the collection, because those were primarily for apartments where you had, several different families sharing one apartment, and they had a shared living space, and you have a small amount of space. And so the tabletop trees.
Got it.
Yeah. So the tabletop trees were a way to bring the holiday in without overwhelming the small space.
Yeah. Of course, in the 20s, first of all, no artificial trees were yet produced in at least the Soviet Union. I don't know about other countries. I think in the 1920s, real trees were a lot more common everywhere. Yeah, and those miniature trees, they are like 1960s or late 1950s, early 1960s.
Yeah, I think the first set of what they call malyutka, which are the small little tiny ornaments that are often replicas of the larger ornaments, was 1957 or 8.
Yeah. I believe you're right. And
so I have a question. Go ahead. Well, I was going to ask a question just to go back to, as you're talking about the collection. So this, for everybody watching, to keep in mind that our holiday exhibitions every year, for how many years, Masha, have been drawn from this same collection?
Yeah, from 2013. That was our first exhibition. I think the collection was not here yet, I believe. We just did you come and bring a little bit of ornaments?
No, I think we had a first exhibition after I had shipped it there. so 2013 or 14, but it's become an annual celebration, which is just so heartwarming.
Yeah,
Well, that's the
yeah.
depth too, is that there's always more. I mean, I know during Masha's sort of exploration into what it's going to be from year to year, there are so many niches and nooks and crannies and thematic material from which to draw. And Masha has been talking about this paper exhibition for a few years, so it's really exciting to see it up. Yeah, so I just wanted to give everybody even more indication of how deep your collection is and how wonderful, how fruitful it's been for the museum and will continue to be.
But what's so special is that, you know, you see young people coming to see this Ephemeral and Eternal exhibition, and they're excited about it because paper was used, you know, in most parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So people can relate to paper.
That's true. And the fact that it is in such pristine condition, and it's I mean, you can tell when you look at it how delicate and how rare these items are, that they exist now. I think everybody can see, and hopefully you can see from the photos as well, how special these items are. So thank you.
I see there is one more question. Was there a tradition of Christmas tree lights or candles? Yeah. And in our display on packaging, we have a box with 3 candles and 1 box with lights. And we have more in the storage.
Mm-hmm.
And 1 poster that talks about fire safety.
Fascinating.
Around the tree, yeah.
Well, with that, I feel like we can probably wrap up for today, although I know the 3 of us could continue talking about this subject and this exhibition and the collection for some time. I thank you again, Kim. Thank you, Masha. This exhibition is on view at the museum through January 15th, 2023. So if you're local, we hope you do come in and see us. But for all of you that can't make it to our galleries and to Minnesota, we hope this gave you a good insight into what you can find here. Any final comments from you, Kim?
No, just thank you for preserving and sharing this collection.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and just the last thing that I want to say, it's not related to the show, but in a way it is. So this show is about the historical Soviet Union that's long gone. We want to uncover a slice of that history and that culture through visual materials. You know, the picture or an image or an object is, a picture is worth 1,000 words, but when you see the actual object, it's probably worth many thousand words, because you can walk around it, you can get the feel of, you look at the materials, you look how light reflects from the piece on different angles, and you inhabit the same space with it.
And you imagine the space that it was in when it was, you know, used to celebrate with a family. It's really, yeah.
Yeah, and as a museum in these difficult times of war in Ukraine, I just want to say that we condemn the aggressive war and we support Ukraine, and we demand that Russia withdraws their troops immediately from Ukraine. We stand with the people of Ukraine, and we are against this war.
Absolutely. Well said. Good words to end on. With that, happy solstice to all of you. Enjoy this holiday season. Thank you for your support of the museum, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.